She is plain, Sir Gideon, and plainness comes cheap. You will not find a better bargain in the county. Plainness I can bear. It is the £400 tied about her ankle that I object to. Merrick stopped in the passage outside the anteroom of the Renfold Assembly Rooms and did not announce himself. He had ridden north through 2 days of rain to buy a wife the way a sensible man buys a horse, sound, quiet, unlikely to bolt. And here were 2 strangers doing his arithmetic for him. The 400 goes with the husband, the woman said. That is the whole beauty of the thing. A wife's debts are her husband's the instant the ring is on her finger. Take her tonight and Vale's bond is yours to carry, and she will thank you on her knees for the carrying. And if I do not care to carry it, then she is taken up for the debt at Martinmas and lodged in the ward at Ardenchester, and I shall have done my Christian duty by my late husband's daughter, and no soul in this county may say otherwise. Chair scraped. Merrick moved on before he could be caught listening, and went down the stair to the long room where the Michaelmas veiling was already filling with wet wool and candle smoke. He knew what he had come for. His father's will had been drawn by a man with a taste for cruelty. Garrowby and every acre under it passed to Merrick's cousin, unless Merrick took a wife before his 35th year, and that year had 11 weeks left to run. He wanted no glittering girl who would want conversation at breakfast. He wanted a plain, sensible woman who would take the title, take the settlement, and leave him his silence. Not for 9 months would the Duke of Garrowby learn what he had bought that night, and when the learning came, he would pay for it in that same room, before those same faces, with every one of them watching him do it. The custom was old and the county was proud of it. Along the north ran a low rail hung with green baize, and behind the rails stood 6 women in grey veils, each with a card at her feet bearing a number and 3 lines of description. Gentlemen subscribed to the parish fund for the right to make an offer. The lady might refuse. That was the whole of the decency in it, and the county considered it sufficient. Your Grace. A broad woman in plum-coloured silk had appeared at his elbow, curtsying deep enough to crack. Mrs. Kell, my daughter has the honour of standing tonight. Number 5, if your Grace will look. Prue is a great favourite. Sings. I have no ear, Merrick said. Number 4 is the other of my house. Mrs. Kell's mouth performed something like regret. My stepdaughter. 27 and no beauty, and a temper on her when crossed. I would not press her on any gentleman. He looked at the card at the feet of number 4, Susanna Vale. 27. Reads and writes a fair hand, keeps accounts. Has no portion. That one, he said. Mrs. Kell's face did something complicated. Your Grace mistakes. 5 is the 4. But the bond, Your Grace, there is a bond of 400. I heard you upstairs, Merrick said. You were very clear. The subscription clerk called the sum, and Sir Gideon Pike, a lean man with a wet mouth, called against him twice, and then stopped, because a duke's purse has no floor, and everybody in the room knew it. Merrick walked the length of the baize rail, with the fund's ledger still open behind him. Then somebody spoke behind the veils, low, meant for no one. Prue, stand straight. He is not looking at you. It was not the voice of a woman being sold. It was the voice of an elder sister steadying a frightened girl, and something in Merrick's chest turned over like a page. Number 5 stood at the end. Number 4 was the third along. He knew the numbers. He had counted them from the door. He put out his hand and lifted the veil of the woman who had spoken, and she was not standing where her card was. She had grey eyes and a wide, unfashionable mouth, and a chin that came up rather than down. Behind her, the girl at number 4 made a small strangled noise, and Merrick understood, in the space of one breath, that the cards had been shifted an hour ago, and that he was meant to have taken the pretty one and never known it. That is the wrong veil, Your Grace, said Mrs. Kell very fast. Is it? Said Merrick. The woman before him did not lower her eyes. It is number 4's veil, she said, and I am number 4. My stepmother moved the cards. If Your Grace wishes to undo the thing, undo it now, before the clerk writes it down. I would rather be humiliated at 8 o'clock than at 9. What is your name? Susanna Vale. The room had gone quiet in the way rooms do. Merrick was aware of Pike somewhere behind him, breathing. Miss Vale, he said, I am the Duke of Garrowby. I require a wife within 11 weeks. I will settle 2,000 a year on you, and your father's bond will be discharged out of my hand before the week is out. You may refuse. The custom permits it, and I will not argue." He expected relief. What crossed her face was closer to grief. "Then you have not understood what you have bought," she said quietly. "Refusal is permitted to women who may refuse. My father set his name to a bond with Sir Gideon Pike and mine beneath it as surety, and it falls due at Martinmas, and I have £11 in the world. If I say no to you tonight, I say yes to the debtor's ward before the frost. My stepmother has known that since August, so has he." She drew the veil out of Merrick's fingers, folded it, and laid it over the rail like a napkin. "You may have my hand, your grace," said Susanna Vale. "You cannot have my consent, because I have not got any left to give. I thought you had better know it before the clerk wrote it down. They were married 11 days later in the grey little church at Renfold, by common licence, with the sexton and Merrick's steward for witnesses." Susanna wore a brown wool gown that had been turned twice at the cuffs. She made her responses in a clear voice and did not cry, and afterwards she asked the sexton the date of the roof repairs, because she had noticed the water stain over the font. "You might have had a new gown," Merrick said in the carriage. "You had only to ask Bram for the money." "I did not know your steward well enough on Tuesday to ask him for £40, said Susanna. "I know him better now. He is honest, and he is tired, and he has been doing 3 men's work since your bailiff died." Merrick looked at her for a while. "You have been at Garrowby 4 hours. 5. Your grace was asleep for one of them." Garrowby stood in a fold of the moor with its back to the weather, 400 years of grey stone and a hall where the fires never quite took hold. Merrick had been raised in it, and had never once thought of it as cold until he watched his wife walk its passages that first week with her hands wrapped round a cracked cup of tea for the warmth, opening doors, counting, saying nothing. Mrs. Kell arrived on the Thursday with Prue and 11 trunks. "A widowed mother cannot be expected to stay in that damp house at Hollow Sith," she announced in the great hall. "Now that her daughter is sister to a duchess, Prue must have the blue rooms. Prue is delicate. Prue is 18 and rides like a poacher," said Susanna. "Prue, the blue rooms face north and you will freeze. Take the ones over the kitchen." Merrick found, to his own surprise, that he had said nothing at all. He was watching. The trouble with the bond came on the Monday. Bram rode to Ardenchester with a bank draft for £412 to discharge the Vale bond and clear the writ, and came back with the draft still in his coat and his ears red. "Sir Gideon will not take it, your grace. He says the bond is assigned away to a third party and he has no power to discharge it. He says the writ stands until the assignee is found, and he cannot say who the assignee is, and he was very pleasant about it. Then we find the assignee. He would not show me the instrument." "He showed it to me in August," said Susanna, from the window seat, where she had been mending a hem and, evidently, listening to every word. "He made a great parade of showing it. May I have a sheet of paper?" She wrote for a minute and handed it across, and Merrick read a fair copy of an endorsement in a clerk's phrasing, complete with the date beneath it. "You remember it exactly. I read it 11 times while he told me what my father had been." "It was assigned on the 22nd of August. She set down her needle. "The 22nd of August was a Sunday, your grace. No attorney in Ardenchester engrosses an assignment on a Sunday, and no bank endorses one. Either the date is a lie or the instrument is." Merrick sat back. "You might have said so in the assembly rooms." "In the assembly rooms I was a lot with a number at my feet," said Susanna. "Lots are not consulted." The first small satisfaction of that autumn came on the Friday, and Merrick tasted it more than she did. Mrs. Kell had spent 4 days establishing that a duchess's mother required an allowance, and she raised it at dinner in front of the county's dullest baronet, in the voice of a woman certain of her ground. 200 a year is nothing to Garrowby. "And there are my expenses on the girl's behalf these 7 years. Her keep, her schooling, her mourning." "Her mourning," Susanna agreed. 12 shillings died at home and I dyed it. She took a folded paper from beside her plate. "I have made out the account, since you raise it. My father left £390 in the funds, which came to you in trust for me and was drawn out in 11 payments between March and July. My schooling was paid by my godmother until she died. My keep for 7 years I set at £40 a year. which is generous, and against it stands the rent of my father's meadow, which you have let to Sir Gideon at 60. The balance owing is £141, and it is owing to me. Silence, and the fire spitting. You are unnatural, said Mrs. Kell. I am exact, said Susanna. Would you like the figures read a second time? The Duke has not seen them either. Merrick discovered that he was holding his wine badly, because his hand had closed too hard on the stem. He set it down. Mrs. Kell, he said, you may have the blue rooms until Sunday. After Sunday you may have Hollow Sith. Bram will convey you. Afterwards, when the house had emptied of its guests and Susanna was gathering her papers by the hall fire, he stood at the end of the table and watched her write out a fair copy for Bram. A list, a total, a line ruled under it. She made her capital letters oddly. The G had a long descending tail that swept back under the word, like a man setting down a walking stick and leaning on it. Merrick's hand went, without instruction from him, to the inner pocket of his coat, where a folded letter had lived for 6 years, worn soft as cloth at the creases. He did not take it out. He stood in his own hall with his fingers on it and his heart going like a hunted thing, and he could not have said, if the house had burned around him, what it was he thought he had just seen. Your Grace, said Susanna, looking up, you have gone quite white. Is it the cold? It is nothing, said Merrick. It is nothing at all. In November the frost came down off the moor and stayed, and Merrick began, without admitting it to himself, to arrange his days around the sound of his wife's footsteps. He gave her the keys. All of them on the iron ring, including the small brass one to the muniment room where 4 centuries of Garrowby's papers lay under mouse dirt and dust. You will want a fire in there, he said. It has not had one since my father died. It ought never to have a fire. Papers and fires are old enemies. Susanna turned the ring over. Why are you giving me these? Because you can count and Bram cannot see to read past 4 o'clock. That is a reason, she said. It is not an answer. He did not give her the answer, because he had not found words for it that did not make him sound like a boy. Instead he took to coming down to breakfast, which he had not done in 9 years, and to riding out with her along the high wall where the tenants could see them. And when an old lady said at the Renfold card party that it was charming, quite charming, to see a duchess who could keep her own accounts, Merrick heard himself say, across a full room, she keeps mine as well. I recommend the practice to any man who is being robbed. Susanna did not thank him for it in the carriage home. She sat with her hands inside her muff and looked at the black hedges going past. You are kind to me now, she said, and it costs you nothing, because I am useful and I do not weep. I would rather you did not mistake that for anything. You think I am buying you a second time. I think you bought me once and have not yet noticed that the thing you bought was a person, said Susanna. You will notice. Men like you always notice eventually, and then they are very sorry, and the sorrow is chiefly for themselves. Merrick had no answer for that either. He found that he wanted one badly. The thaw, such as it was, went on in small ways he could not have defended in argument. She took the cracked cup from the servants' hall for her own use, because she liked the shape of the handle, and no one else would have it. She learned every man on the North Farms by name in 3 weeks. She read aloud to him in the evenings from the estate books, and once, reading a bailiff's account of a cow drowned in 1691, she laughed so suddenly that he laughed too, and then they both sat in some confusion as though a window had blown open. On the 29th of November, Sir Gideon came up the avenue in a hired chaise with a clerk beside him. Merrick received him in the hall standing, and did not offer a chair. Your Grace. Pike was smiling. He had a way of smiling that used only the lower half of his face. I come as a friend, and I come with a paper, and you will forgive me if I take the paper first, for it is the civil order of things. Say it. A citation out of the consistory court at Ardenchester. The clerk held it out, and Bram took it, and Merrick did not look at it yet. A suit is brought to declare the pretended marriage between yourself and Susanna Vale null and void from the beginning, for want of free consent in the woman. The hall was very quiet. From the gallery above, Merrick heard the small sound of a door not quite closing. Consent, he said. 11 persons of respectability heard her say it, Your Grace, in the assembly rooms at Renfold, in a clear voice, before the clerk wrote her name. You cannot have my consent, because I have not got any left to give. Mrs. Kell will swear to it. I shall swear to it. The subscription clerk will swear to it. The court is not obliged to like me. It is only obliged to hear me. You brought the debt that took her consent from her, Merrick said, and now you will hang her by it. I will do better than that. Pike's smile widened by a fraction. I will have the marriage struck out, and the £400 stands where it stood, upon a spinster with £11, and Martinmas is behind us, and the ward at Ardenchester is not a healthy house in winter, unless, of course, some arrangement recommends itself. I am a reasonable man. I would take the Vale Meadow and the North grazing and consider the matter closed. Merrick had been schooled from the cradle never to raise his voice in his own hall. He was surprised how little the schooling helped. Get out. Certainly. Pike drew on his gloves. Your Grace should understand the whole of it, so that no one may say I dealt darkly. If the marriage is void, it is void from the beginning. Your father's will requires a wife before your 35th year, and your 35th year expires on the 7th of January. There would not be time to marry again, and there is no woman in England who would stand up with you once the court has said the last one was bought. Garrowby goes to your cousin in Lisbon, who has never seen it, and will sell the timber inside a 12-month. He bowed. The court sits on the 14th of December. That is a fortnight and a day. I do wish your Grace a pleasant Christmas. The chaise went down the avenue. Merrick stood in the doorway with the cold coming in around him and read the citation twice, and the 14th of December sat in the middle of it in a clerk's round hand like a stone in a shoe. Susanna came down the stairs. She had heard all of it. He could see that she had. He is wrong about one thing, Merrick said. I will not let it come to the ward. You cannot stop it. It is not your debt and it is not your court. She took the paper out of his hand and read it herself, and her face did not change, and that frightened him more than anything Pike had said. A fortnight and a day, she said. Then we had better be quick. For 9 days they worked in the muniment room together, and Merrick was happier than he had been since he was 19. They were hunting the assignment. Pike had lodged a copy with the court, and a copy is a copy, but the Vale bond had been drawn by an attorney in Ardenchester who had since died, and dead attorneys leave papers behind them. Susanna wrote to the widow. Susanna wrote to the bank. Susanna wrote to the parish clerk at Hollowseth for the register of Sundays, which made Merrick laugh out loud, because it was the sort of thing only she would think to want. They ate off a board laid over 2 chests. She brought up pears from the store and cut them with a penknife and gave him half each time without being asked, and the room smelled of vellum and mouse and pear juice, and outside the window the moor went white. On the 8th night, with the candle low, she asked him why he had never married. There was a girl once who wanted a house in town, Merrick said, and then my brother died, and after that I did not think much about anything for 2 years. How did he die? A fever at a coaching inn on the Crossgate Road, 30 miles from anyone who loved him. He was 22. He turned a deed over without seeing it. There was a woman at the inn, nobody's relation. She sat with him 4 days when the landlord wanted him put out in the yard, and she wrote to me afterwards and told me what he said at the end, which was not much and was kind. I never learned who she was. I sent money to the inn and it came back. Susanna had gone very still, with the penknife in her hand. You keep the letter, she said. I keep the letter. She did not ask to see it. He almost showed her. Afterwards he would think of that moment for a long time, the wick guttering, the pear half-eaten, her face turned away, and he would understand that he had been within one honest gesture of everything and had let it go by. On the 11th of December he rode to Ardenchester alone, and did the thing that broke it. His proctor was a careful old man who wanted the case won and did not care how. The safest defence, he said, was not to fight the want of consent, but to concede it and shift the weight. Let his Grace swear that the woman had stood under duress from her stepmother, and the bondholder, that she had had no free will in the matter, and the court's anger would turn upon Kell and Pike, where it belonged. And beside it, prudently, a deed of settlement, 600 a year, and the house at Sallowbay upon the Duchess, to take effect in the event the marriage be pronounced null, so that whatever befell, she would never see the inside of the ward. Merrick signed both. He rode home in the dark believing he had saved her, and he did not tell her, because he could not think how to begin. Bram brought the papers up on the 13th to be copied, and Bram could not read past 4 o'clock, and it was 5, and Susanna was in the muniment room with the candles lit. Merrick found her standing with the affidavit in one hand and the deed in the other, and the peers untouched on the board. The woman taken at the Renfold rail, she read out. That is your own phrasing. Your proctor would not have written taken. He would have written the said Susanna Viola. Susanna, being wholly without will or consent in the matter, as this deponent then well knew. She set the affidavit down very gently, which was worse than throwing it. You have sworn on oath that you married a woman you knew had no will. You have handed Sir Gideon Pike his case in your own hand and paid the stamp on it. I have handed him a hook to hang himself on. It puts the fault where it belongs. It puts me where I have been since September, which is on a card at the foot of a rail. Her voice did not rise. That was the terrible part. And this second paper, 600 a year and a house at Sallow Bay, in the event the marriage be pronounced null. You have furnished me out for the ending, Merrick. You made your arrangements for my leaving while I was cutting up peers for you. I did it so that you should never be afraid again. You did it so that you should never have to watch me be afraid, said Susanna. There is a difference, and you will feel it presently. Tell me what you want, and I will do it. Tell me, and it is done. I wanted to be asked. She blew out the nearest candle, and then the next. Nobody has asked me anything since my father died. Not Mrs. Kell, not Pike, not the subscription clerk, not you. You are the best of them, and that is the whole of what I can say for the 4 of you tonight. She went out and shut the door without slamming it, and Merrick stood among 400 years of other men's papers with the wax cooling on the board. He did not sleep. Toward 3 he heard the stable door, and told himself it was the wind, because it suited him to. At 6:30 he came down in the dark and found the muniment room swept, and the peers gone, and one paper laid square in the middle of the board, weighted with the cracked cup. It was not addressed to him. It was a fair copy, in her long-tailed hand, of an answer entered in the consistory court at Ardenchester by Susanna, Duchess of Garrowby, in her own person and at her own charge, denying every article of the libel and requiring it to be heard. Beneath it, in the same hand, 4 words. I will speak myself. The consistory court at Ardenchester sat in the south aisle of the cathedral, under a roof that leaked in a cold that got into the ink. Merrick came in at 10 minutes past 10, and the doors were loud, and every head turned but one. His wife stood alone at the bar in the brown wool gown with the turned cuffs. She had refused his proctor. The old man had ridden out to her lodging at 7 that morning with a note in Merrick's hand, and had brought the note back unopened, and had said, with something in his voice that might have been admiration, that her grace appeared in her own person and required no gentleman to stand between herself and the truth. There was a place kept for Merrick at the front. He did not take it. He stood at the back against the cold stone with his hat in his hands, among the curious of 3 parishes, and he understood that this was the whole of what he was permitted to do, and that he had bought the permission himself. You are Susanna Val, said the judge. I am Susanna, Duchess of Garrowby, and I was Susanna Vale, and I answer to both. Pike's advocate opened it beautifully. 11 respectable witnesses. A rail, a number, a veil, a subscription. And her own words, spoken before the clerk wrote her name. You cannot have my consent, because I have not got any left to give. Did you say those words? The judge asked her. I did. Do you say now that you did not mean them? I meant every syllable, said Susanna. And this court has been invited to hear only half of the sentence. I did not say I gave no consent. I said I had none left. There is a difference, and every woman in this aisle knows it, whether or not the law has troubled to learn it. She set her hands on the bar. What had taken it from me was a bond of £400 with my name upon it as surety, held by Sir Gideon Pike, falling due at Martimas. That is what stood behind me at the rail, not the Duke. He came into the room after the theft was done, and paid for the privilege of standing in the place of the thief. Whatever else is to be said against him, he did not empty my hands. He is the only man in this business who offered me anything and then told me I might refuse. Merrick's throat closed. She had not looked at him once. Then you consented freely? I consented as poor people do, she said, with the choices I was left. If this court holds that no such consent is worth the name, then it holds that no woman without money in this kingdom has ever been married at all, and I do not think the court wishes to hold that. She took up her papers and did it quietly, and the idol went very still. The parish register of Hollow Sith, the 22nd of August, being a Sunday, 3 baptisms after evening service. The daybook of the late attorney who drew the bond, sent up by his widow, showing him at Kirkby Rise on the 22nd and no attendance for Sir Gideon Pike in that month at all. A letter from the bank at Ardenchester. No assignment of any bond in the name of Vale had ever been presented, endorsed, or registered there. The instrument by which Sir Gideon refused the Duke's money, said Susanna, was engrossed on a Sunday by a man 30 miles off and endorsed at a bank that never saw it. It exists to keep a debt alive. A dead debt has no power over me. A living one may be used to say that I have no will, and then to sell my meadow, and then to sell my marriage. The subscription clerk was called and made to open the fund book. £92 had been paid into it on the night of the veiling by the Duke of Garrowby. 60 of them had gone out again the same night in cash to Mrs. Kell. Mrs. Kell rose in her plum-coloured silk and said it was a gift for the disposal of her stepdaughter, and heard herself say it, and sat down. Then Pike's advocate, being a man who could feel the floor moving, tried the last door. Your Grace stands to lose a great settlement if this marriage be void. 600 a year, a house at Sallow Bay. It is a powerful reason to swear to a consent one never gave. I return the settlement, said Susanna. She laid the deed on the bar unexecuted, with the seal never cut. I have not signed it, and I will not. This court pronounces me no wife. Then I am Susanna Vale with £11, and I shall answer the 400 at law like any other debtor, and I shall go where the law sends me, and I shall keep the accounts there, for I am told there is need of it. I did not come here to be provided for. I came because a man in this room has told the county I have no will, and I find that I have. The aisle broke into noise. The judge let it run and then knocked it down. For the record, he said, state your name and place of abode at the time of the alleged marriage. Susanna Vale, spinster of Hollow Sith in this county. She paused, before that of the Crossgate Road, where my father kept the inn at Crossgate for 19 years, until his creditors took the licence and the sign and the beds, and he did not survive it long. Merrick did not hear the rest. His hand had gone into his coat. The letter came out worn soft as cloth, and he opened it there against the cold stone, at the back of a cathedral aisle, with the whole county between him and his wife. 6 years old, a cheap sheet, folded small. The capital G with its long descending tail, sweeping back under the word like a man setting down a stick and leaning on it. He was not afraid at the end, and he asked me to say that the orchard at Garrowby is very fine in April, and that you are not to blame yourself for the horse. There was no name at the foot of it. There never had been. He had looked at that blank place 10,000 times. She had sat 4 days with his brother, and washed him, and written to a stranger to spare him, and she had never once told him, and 11 weeks ago he had bought her off a rail for £92, because she was plain and cheap, and would not want conversation at breakfast. My Lord Judge, Merrick said, from the back of the aisle, I ask leave to withdraw my affidavit and to be sworn again. 300 faces turned. He walked the length of the cold flags with his hat in his hand and the letter in the other, and he took the book and told the truth on oath, and it cost him exactly what such things cost. The paper I swore on the 11th was drawn to win a case. It says my wife had no will. It is false, and I knew it was false when I signed it. And I signed it because I would rather be thought a man who bought a woman than watch a court frighten her. That was cowardice dressed as protection. He looked at the judge and not at her, because he had not earned the right to look at her. Her consent was given in my hearing freely after I had told her she might refuse. I asked the court to strike my affidavit and to enter my apology upon the roll, where it may be read by anybody who cares to. The judge, who had sat 40 years in that draughty aisle, took off his spectacles. The sentence came before noon. The marriage stood. The pretended assignment was pronounced a forgery and the papers sent over to the temporal court, and Sir Gideon Pike went out of the cathedral between 2 men and did not come back to Ardenshire. And the £60 paid to Mrs. Kell was ordered repaid to the parish fund, which finished her in the county more thoroughly than any judgment could. Susanna walked out into the churchyard alone. Merrick did not follow her. It was, he thought, the first wholly unselfish thing he had done in 9 years, and it was harder than the oath. The Christmas assembly at Renfold was held on the 22nd, in the long room with the green baize rail still bolted to the north wall. The county came for the sport of it. They had heard the Duke of Garrowby had bought a plain wife for £92 and been made a fool of by a bondholder, and they came to see how he would carry it, and they found him standing at the rail with his coat unbuttoned and no dignity about him at all. "You are all owed an account," Merrick said, "and I will give it standing where I stood in September." He gave it plainly. There were the 11 weeks, the horse-fair reasoning that had brought him north, the card at her feet, 7 and 20, no beauty, no portion. His own hand on a veil that everyone in the room had assured him was the wrong one. "I came here for a plain bride because a plain bride would ask nothing of me. I have been asked for nothing in 3 months. I have been given a great deal." He drew the worn letter from his coat and unfolded it. 6 years ago, my brother died of fever at the inn at Crossgate, 30 miles from anybody who loved him. The landlord wished him put out into the yard. A woman of that house sat with him 4 days and nights and washed him, and held his hand at the end, and then wrote to me, a stranger, a duke, a man who might have made her fortune with a word, to tell me that he was not afraid, and that I was not to blame myself for the horse. She signed nothing. She asked for nothing. I sent money to that inn and it came back. He read the letter aloud to the room. His voice went at the orchard and he waited and finished it. Her father kept that inn until his creditors took it. Her name is Susanna, and you sold her at this rail in September for the price of a saddle horse, and I bought her, and I have been ashamed once already this month in a public court, and find that I can bear a second time. Nobody spoke. Somewhere at the back a woman was crying, and it was not Susanna, who stood in the doorway in grey silk with her chin up in the way she had. "I am giving £4,000 to the parish fund," Merrick said, "upon one condition, which the churchwardens have accepted. The veiling is done. There will be no more rails in this room. The money goes in portions to the women of this county who have none, and it will be called the Crossgate Fund, and if anybody wishes to know why, they may ask my wife, who is standing behind you and who has been asked for nothing by anybody for 6 years." Then he came down the room to her, and asked her in front of every soul in Ardenshire, whether she would consent to be his wife, freely, with nothing owing, nothing hanging over her, and a house of her own at Sallowbay signed over that morning in her sole name, so that she might walk out of Garrowby any day she chose and be no poorer for it. Susanna looked at him for a long moment. "Not here," she said. "You have paid enough in public. Ask me again in the carriage, where it is only me that hears it." She told him her answer somewhere on the moor road between Renfold and Garrowby, and he never repeated it to anybody, and he did not stop smiling until Candlemas. The orchard at Garrowby was very fine that April, exactly as a dying boy had promised a stranger it would be. Susanna had the muniment room properly fitted at last, a long desk under the window, a chair that did not wobble, and a fire in the outer room only, on principle. Bram wore spectacles now and could read past 4 o'clock, and had 2 men under him and less grey in his face. Prue lived with them and rode like a poacher and was engaged at 18, to nobody at all, by her own decision and her sister's advice. The cracked cup stood on the desk with pens in it. Merrick came in one evening in blossom time with the estate books under his arm, found his wife asleep over the North Farm accounts with her cheek on her hand and ink on her fingers, and the letter in its frame on the wall above her, the long-tailed catching the last of the light. He put his coat over her shoulders and sat down on the chest to wait, in no hurry at all, in the warmest room in the house.